Chapter 48, Time to Say Goodbye. Winterfell, 294 AC. Jon took a deep breath, reflecting on the incredible wedding in the past week, which had been even more remarkable. They had said their goodbyes to some of the northernmost lords. The Glovers left with a new trade deal, much to their delight. The Umbers, on the other hand, had practically been chased out of the yard by Ghost, and it was quite a sight to behold. Small Jon had brought it upon himself, joking about how Ghost hadn't approached him during his visit. That was practically an invitation for the White Wolf, and Ghost did not disappoint. "I don't know what you did with him, Jon, but it made for a better visit, did it not, father?" "Aye, son, that it did." "Why are you smiling, Jon?" "Jon, he's behind me, isn't he?" Great Jon said, his voice laced with apprehension. "I wouldn't move if I were you, my lord," Jon replied, smirking as Ghost's large head emerged between the two men's arms before slipping away, as quiet as ever. "I tell you, that damn wolf's not right," Small Jon muttered as he climbed onto his horse. "I hope to see you again soon, Jon." "Ned, it's always a pleasure," Great Jon added, riding off into the distance. They had at least shown the courtesy to wait until the Umbers had left the courtyard before bursting into laughter, all except Jojen, who gazed forlornly at the spot where Liara had waved to him not long before. With the Umbers, Glovers, and other northern lords gone, only those who would join their own party in a week or two remained. This made the dinners more intimate, even with some lords still present. For now, however, Jon had other things on his mind as he headed toward his uncle's solar. Unfortunately, he wasn't lucky enough to make it there without being interrupted. Spotting his aunt and the septa approaching, he braced himself for trouble. He had intentionally come alone. Loras was with Robb and the girls, while Jaime and Daisy were busy. He preferred not to walk around the keep with his guards, so Jors, Allers, and Walder were off training. He glanced at the smirk on his aunt's face, knowing that he was in for a conversation he might not want to have. Jon noticed the expression on his aunt's face and felt a wave of unease wash over him. Still, he resolved to remain polite and respectful, even if she wouldn't. "What are you doing here, bastard?" she demanded. "I have a meeting with Lord Stark, my lady," he replied. "Why would my husband want to speak to you?" "I do not know, my lady." "Perhaps it would be better to ask Lord Stark." "You really are an insolent little bastard, aren't you?" she said with a sneer. "My lady? You may think I don't know what you're up to, but I do, and I won't allow it." "As you say, my lady," Jon responded. Despite himself, he couldn't help but smirk at her, watching her face twist into a mask of pure anger. "Why, you." The slap would have hurt, no doubt, but he wasn't the same 6-year-old boy who had once accepted such treatment from the Lady of Winterfell. Instead of meeting her hand, he slipped away, leaving her to grasp at air. "You should watch yourself, my lady." "We wouldn't want anything to happen to your hand," he said, disappearing before she could react. He knew he shouldn't have said it, but he found he didn't care. When he reached his uncle's solar, he saw Jory standing outside. He offered a warm smile, which Jory returned before ushering him inside. His uncle was seated at his desk, poring over papers. Jon took a seat and waited for his uncle to finish, preparing himself for the conversation he had come for. Instead, his uncle spoke first. "Luwin showed me the proposals you made about Wintertown. You think these numbers are right?" he asked, handing Jon the paper. "Aye, that's the minimum return, uncle. I believe it will work out far better than that. With numbers like this, the benefits would be enormous, Jon. With that and the increase in taxes, we can finally start projects I've long put off for lack of coin. Such as Moat Cailin, Sea Dragon Point, a keep for Bran. I've been delaying them all, but with this, we can begin. Do you have the people, uncle?" "Some may come, but not enough," Luwin said. "You thought some of those in Flea Bottom might join us if we invite them?" "Aye," Jon replied. Their conditions are terrible. Lady Marjorie and I have tried, but handouts only go so far. Given the offer of work and a place to live, I think they'd come, though we'd have to organize their travel. We should look into it, Jon. Lord Jaime mentioned what you did with the tourney money. It's a good thing you're doing, Jon. She'd be proud of you. I hope so, Jon said, nodding. Here, before I forget, I did this for you. He handed his uncle the drawing of the 4 Starks at Harrenhal. Jon, this is incredible. Thank you. His uncle smiled as he ran his finger over the drawing. Uncle, I came about something else. Can you promise you won't be mad and will at least listen? Jon. I'll listen. I want to talk to you about fostering, Uncle. I think you need to consider it. Who? His uncle asked, looking at him thoughtfully. All of them, Uncle. Jon, you can't mean it. They're too young. Not all right away. Arya would need to be older, and Bran too. But Sansa is almost 8, Robb is my age. They need to learn like you did, like I have. Where would you have them go? Arya with the Mormonts when she's old enough. She and Lyanna are already inseparable. That's true, his uncle said, a small smile forming on his face. Bran wants to be a knight, Uncle. I'll take him as a squire when he's older. And Robb? Sansa? Highgarden for Sansa. Lady Marjorie is not much older than her, and she'd love it there. I would have suggested the Rock, but I know fostering isn't just about what's best for the children. I'm not my father, Jon, his uncle said, a hint of annoyance in his voice. I know that, Uncle. That's not what I meant. It's just that it would be good for the North and the Reach to get along better. That's true. As for Robb, I don't know of a northern house, though perhaps the Umbers or the Karstarks might work. Still, I think the Manderleys would be best, Jon suggested. Why? His uncle asked. There's trade to consider. If the North is to prosper in the future, wouldn't it be better to have a lord trained in trade? Jon replied. As opposed to one who's not trained at all, his uncle remarked. When Jon turned to him, he was surprised to see a hint of mirth in his uncle's expression. Well, I never would have said that. Plus, there's the fact that he and Lady Winifred get along well. Are you trying to marry off my children now, my king? Ned said, shaking his head. What? I wouldn't do that, Uncle, you know that, Jon said, just as his uncle burst into laughter. Is it not a crime to jest at a king's expense? No, his uncle replied, laughing along with him. I'll consider it, Jon. We'll talk more before you leave. Of course, Uncle. Jon, we need to discuss Cat. No, Uncle, we don't. Your wife hates me, and so does her family. It's best we leave it at that. If she knew the truth, Jon. She may tell Robert. No, Uncle, I won't command you, but I will ask you not to. Very well, his uncle said, nodding. Thank you, Uncle, Jon replied as he stood up. You're quite good at this, his uncle said as Jon was leaving. I've had good teachers, Jon said, thinking of Loras. Watching the Mormont ladies spar with the men never got old. For Arya and Lyanna, it was like seeing their futures laid out before them. For Mira, it was a reminder of how much she still had to learn. But for Loras, it was something he was grateful to Jon for. Had he not made friends with him and shared those experiences while squired together, he might never have witnessed such moments. Given the fight on the horizon, he doubted it would have ever happened under any other circumstances. Earlier, he had watched Lyra, Jory, and Alysanne take on some of the Lannister and Stark men. He had seen Walder defeat almost everyone he faced, except for Jory and Ser Roderick, and that was due more to. Jon, Robb, and Jaime were gearing up for a sparring match. What began as a friendly three-way bout quickly transformed into a 2-on-1 challenge, with Robb and Jaime teaming up against Jon. Despite their combined efforts in a lengthy struggle, they finally managed to bring Jon down. He took the defeat gracefully, congratulating them both and playfully vowing revenge for their next encounter. As the atmosphere shifted, a hush fell over the yard. Even Lord Stark had come out to witness the spar between Jaime Lannister and his wife, Daisy. Daisy's three oldest sisters and her mother lined up eagerly to watch, while Lyanna and Arya chattered excitedly nearby. Jon stood with Sansa and Mira, while Jojen and Robb were gathered on the opposite side. Jon leaned in to whisper something to Sansa, and her giggles echoed around the yard as she playfully slapped him on the shoulder. Jon responded with a mock-serious expression, quickly breaking into laughter alongside her. Daisy turned to Jaime, a teasing glint in her eye. "Are you really sure about this, my love? I'd hate to bruise you too badly." Jaime chuckled in response, "My love, you won't even manage to land a hit." Such confidence. "A lion's pride is truly something to behold," Daisy replied. "You should hear me roar," Jaime joked, eliciting more laughter from the crowd. Meej chimed in, "Will you two just fight already? I could be drinking ale instead of listening to this nonsense. In fact, I should be drinking ale anyway." At that, the spar began, and Daisy almost caught Jaime off guard right away. He dodged her strike, and they started exchanging blows. Loras noticed Jon frowning as he watched the match, and he wondered what was bothering him. A moment later, the reason became clear. Though Daisy hadn't landed a hit, she clearly had the upper hand, and frustration bubbled over. "If you don't put your full effort into this, I swear I'll crack your damn stupid skull," she exclaimed, anger evident in her voice. "I'm trying," Jaime replied, a hint of defensiveness creeping into his tone. "You're not," Daisy shot back, her determination unwavering. What Loras witnessed next was astonishing. For 2 years, he had sparred with Jaime, and while he had seen him hold back in practice, he had never seen him genuinely try. Now, with Daisy's fierce challenge, it was clear that this spar was about to reveal the true intensity of their rivalry. Jon's intensity was even greater than his own, as that was how he had trained both of them. It was one thing to see Jaime put in some effort, but witnessing him truly fight to win was something else entirely. His movements were incredible. The only person he knew who could move that fast was Jon. Yet Jaime also possessed much more power, strength, and technique. He seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. He thrust, parried the blow from Daisy's mace, and danced between the front and the side. Loras watched in awe. When the end came, he saw Jaime almost mimic Jon's move from his spar with Mira. He used his sword to deflect Daisy's mace, brought it down to the ground, and spun around, his sword pointed at his wife's throat. "I yield," Daisy said, and Loras was surprised to see the smile on her face. "Of course you do," Jaime replied, just as the smack of the mace hitting his lord's leg echoed through the air. "Never trust a wounded bear, my love," Daisy warned, prompting laughter from her sisters and mother. Once the spar was over, Daisy and Jaime walked off together. Loras smirked, recalling how Jon had been unfortunate enough to stumble upon them kissing more than once. Given the way they looked at each other, he decided it was best to leave them alone. Arya and Lyanna joined Mira and Jojen for archery practice. Without Jon, it had become a regular thing ever since Mira showcased her skills. Loras and Robb strolled over to Sansa and Jon, who were laughing about something. "What's so funny?" Loras asked. "Jon was saying I could fight like that," Sansa replied. "I didn't say that, I said you could fight too," Jon corrected her. "How?" Robb interjected, noticing Sansa's annoyed look before she relaxed, realizing his question stemmed from curiosity. "A dagger, perhaps, or even a bow. But some sort of knife would be best," Jon suggested. "You mean like Marjorie uses?" Loras asked. "What?" both Jon and Sansa exclaimed in unison. "My grandmother made." "Sure, Marjorie had some lessons, just in case." "In case of what?" Jon asked, his curiosity piqued. What if she found herself without a guard, Jon? I didn't know that. Jon replied, surprised. Well, now you do, Sansa said with a smirk. Oh, you. Where's that mud? Jon teased, provoking shrieks of protest. Jon, no. Sansa exclaimed, moving away from her brother. Come on, let's go see the wolves, Jon suggested. Loras and Sansa nodded in agreement, but Robb shook his head and walked off in the opposite direction. The wolves had grown, and according to Jon, they seemed to have chosen their favorites. The two female wolves had become increasingly close to Arya and Sansa. While they still stayed with their mother, they would run to the girls whenever they spotted them. One of the males had taken a liking to young Brandon, much to Lord Stark's amusement, while the other, a black wolf, preferred to stay with Ghost. The last one also spent its time with Ghost or its mother. They had hoped it would choose Robb, but it hadn't. Jon knew that Robb felt a bit upset about it. Jon, however, didn't seem as bothered. Had he not known his friends so well, he might have found it odd or worried that Robb still hadn't forgiven his brother. But he understood it was more about the wolves themselves than anything else, so he kept his thoughts to himself. Here she comes. Jon exclaimed as the wolf dashed toward Sansa, licking her face as it reached her. Have you thought of a name yet? Loras asked. No, I'm still thinking, Sansa replied. I think Arya named hers before she even knew she was getting one, Jon joked, prompting laughter from the group. They watched as Sansa played with the little gray wolf, and soon the black one and another gray emerged, almost as if escorting the female back toward the tower. Brothers, Loras said, chuckling. Pack, Sansa added, and Jon nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, Wyman and Meej had discussed at length what to do about Jon. Should they go directly to him and bend the knee? Should they talk to Jaime? Or should they? Should we speak to Ned first? In the end, they decided it was best to talk to their liege lord. They waited for the right moment, watching as he entered the God's Wood, and then they followed him. Wylis and his guards would ensure they had privacy, but they needed to speak with Ned to uncover the truth and see if he would support his blood and back the true king. Meej walked quietly beside Wyman as they made their way to the heart tree. From a distance, he could see Ned sitting there, rubbing a cloth up and down the Valyrian sword, ice. Even from afar, it looked imposing. As they approached, Ned looked up and nodded. He took a seat across from Wyman, while Meej opted to remain standing. Wyman, Meej, Ned said as he settled in. Ned, Meej replied, clearly leaving it to Wyman to begin. Ned, we need to speak about the lad. The lad, Wyman? Jon, Wyman said. What about Jon? Ned asked. About his mother, Wyman replied, watching as Ned gulped. Jon's mother is none of your business. That's true, Ned, but we must speak of her anyway. It's time you told us the truth. What truth? Of Lyanna, Meej said, noticing Ned's sigh. Some truths are not mine to tell. Ned, we know you're among friends, both you and Jon, I swear it, Meej reassured him, seeing the relief wash over his face. How? Ned asked. Wyman noticed it first, Meej said, looking at him. It took a while. I thought he might have been Brandon's, but he didn't have the temperament, Wyman explained. He has some of it, Ned said with a smile. But far more of Lyanna's, Meej added, and Ned nodded in agreement. When they stayed at White Harbor, the things he did, but it was seeing him on his horse. You know what he named her, don't you? Wyman asked, glancing between them and noticing their confusion. Winter, he said with a smile, and he saw both of them share in that joy. Seeing him on the... Ned knew it was clear, Jon could only be Lyanna's son. No one else came close when it came to riding a horse like she did. Ned said, a warm look on his face. Is he trueborn? Wyman asked, and Meej scowled at him. They had already had this conversation, with Meej insisting there was no way Lyanna would have lain with the prince while unmarried. Wyman pointed out that they still needed to uncover the truth. He is Wyman. They married in front of the old gods on the Isle of Faces and in a September at Harrenhal. Do you have proof? Wyman pressed. Jon has the announcements, signed and witnessed by the King's Guard and the Septon. What of Elia? Meej asked. She stepped aside. It seems she was agreeable to it. I do not know her reasons, Meej, Ned replied, glancing at them to gauge their reactions. Jon was the rightful king. True, it might not matter in the grand scheme, but when Jon made his claim, and Ned had no doubt he would have the right of things on his side. So, what now? Ned asked. It depends on you, my lord. Will you support him? Meej asked, her gaze locked on the Lord of Winterfell. He is my blood, he has my support, Ned declared. Mine too, Wyman added, and Meej echoed him. Should we speak to him, Ned? Let him know, him or my good son? Meej inquired. How about both, Meej? Wyman suggested, and Ned nodded in agreement. He walked to the gate and whispered in Wylis's ear, instructing him to fetch Jon and Jaime. It took only a few moments before Jaime and Daisy arrived first, followed closely by Jon and Loras. Wyman cast a worried glance at Ned, who simply nodded. It seemed the Tyrell boy had been informed. Good, the king would need a friend for the trials ahead. My lords, my lady, Jaime greeted as he looked at the three of them. Both Jon and Loras returned the greeting, though Jon's gaze lingered on his uncle. Jon, Lord Wyman and Lady Meej have. I figured out the truth about your mother, Ned said. Of course, uncle, Jon replied, glancing at Wyman and Meej with a hint of nervousness. I knew your mother well, Jon. As I told you, I considered her my friend. As her son, you have my mace should you ever wish it, Meej said as she knelt. You have White Harbor and House Manderley, my king, Wyman added, also taking a knee. He noticed Daisy looking on in shock while Loras smiled, though it was Jaime who wore the brightest smile of all. Rise, my lord, my lady. I won't have you kneeling for long, Jon said, prompting Wyman to smirk. I thank you. My body is not made for kneeling, Wyman replied. I knew you were a damn wilding, Meej said, earning a laugh from the group. My lord, my lady, I appreciate your support. I promise I won't do anything or have you do anything that would bring dishonor to either of your houses. I swear it here, in this sacred place, Jon declared, and Wyman noticed that his uncle's smile was broad now too. We should discuss plans, my king, about arranging communications and the like, Wyman suggested. I'll have Richard contact you both as soon as possible, Jon said. Richard? Wyman asked, confused. Sir Richard Lonmouth, my master of whisperers, Jon clarified, and now Wyman smiled broadly. It seemed the king was already playing the game. Ned reflected on the past week, which had flown by, from Jon discussing fostering with him to Wyman and Meej's revelation in the Godswood. Having two of his bannermen on board with Jon so quickly exceeded his expectations. It would not only be beneficial in the future but also provide invaluable advice for handling current matters. The idea of fostering became even clearer, while Jon hadn't mentioned these two houses as anything other than what was best for his children, having them sworn to Jon already offered him more incentive. So, he had asked to meet them both, separately. Lord, Lady Meej, Alan announced as he brought in the she-bear. My lord, Meej responded, her formality returning under Alan's watchful eye. My lady, would you like some ale? Got any ice? I do, as it happens, Ned said with a smirk. He retrieved the ice from a container that Lewin had crafted. It was larger than a mug, lined with something, and had a lid. He broke off a couple of large chunks, placing them in Meej's mug before filling it with ale. He did the same for himself. I wanted to speak to you about Arya, Meej. She's a fierce little wolf, that one. She and my Lyanna are becoming quite friendly. I know. I wonder if you'd be interested in fostering her when she's older, Meej. I'd take her now if you'd let me, Meej laughed. She's still a bit young, and besides, her mother won't agree, at least, not yet. Ned noticed Meej's frown. Do you have a problem with my wife, Meej? Just some of her attitudes, Ned. A sept, really? It's her religion, Meej. It was the least I could do. I have no qualms with her religion, aside from it being a waste of bloody time. All that singing, give me heart trees any day, Meej said, and Ned couldn't help but agree. Then what? The children, Ned. What about them? A septa, Ned. You know she called my Lyanna a savage. Damn stupid woman. Oh, don't worry, you needn't say anything to her. My girls took care of that, Meej said, a small smirk crossing her face. What happened? Let's just say your stable lad was more than happy to help, she laughed, and Ned didn't want to know more, though he was baffled that he hadn't heard about it before. So you think she's not helping my children? I think this is the North. While there are places and times for southern courtesies, and I'm not against anyone acting like a lady, not if it's at the expense of being a northerner, Meej said, and Ned couldn't help but agree. What would you have me do? Ned asked, curiosity in his voice. If it were me, I'd send the woman packing back to the September. But it's not me, Ned. So I'd hire someone to teach the children what it means to be of the North, too. I'll think on it, Meej. As for Arya, whenever you wish it, I'll be happy to have her. Thanks, Meej. Once she finished her ale, they continued their conversation, focusing mainly on trade deals and how they would benefit both Bear Island and the North. Ned mentioned the keeps, and Meej suggested that both Moat Cailin and Sea Dragon Point needed attention. They would require better coastal protection now that they would be trading along it. After Meej left, Ned decided to take a walk around the keep. As he passed by the room where the Septa was conducting her lesson, he paused to listen in. Inside, he could hear Sansa, the Manderley girls, and Arya grumbling about something, which brought a smile to his face. He stood there for a few minutes, listening more intently. What the Septa was teaching them was a mystery. It didn't sound like anything particularly useful. Where were the lessons on economics, or managing a keep? The politics and skills a noble lady should know? He realized he would need to return in the coming days. Perhaps he had stumbled upon a different kind of lesson. He continued on to find Wyman and discuss the next fostering, which was happening much sooner than expected. Hearing laughter from outside, he moved to the window to see what was going on. He watched as Robb was knocked to the ground by Mira's spear, and he smiled when he saw his son nod respectfully. Turning his gaze to the walkway, he spotted his wife watching the scene unfold, though she was far from smiling. Sighing, he knew he would hear about it later. God knows what she would say when she learned of his fostering plans, but at least one of her children would be going to her precious South, Daisy. If there was one thing that brought her joy, it was that. Her new husband, aside from his firm physique, seemed unable to be satisfied with just one encounter. They had been proving that over the past few days. It wasn't all they did. He had sparred with her, and she was in awe of watching him fight. They read and wrote together, laughing at the same things, her sense of humor perfectly matching his. What are you thinking? He asked as she lay on her stomach, looking at him. That I wish I had hair like yours, she replied with a smirk. No, you don't. Besides, I think your hair is far prettier, he said, brushing it away from her eyes. Prettier than yours, maybe. But not compared to Jon's, she joked, and they both laughed. Poor boy doesn't know what he's in for once we get back. My aunt won't let him and Loras walk around looking like that, he chuckled, while she grew pensive. You think they'll like me? She asked. How could they not? he said, leaning in to kiss her. I'm not what they may have had in mind, though. Well, then they're going to like you even more. Why's that? Because, just like me, they'll soon realize you're everything they always wanted. Lyanna was right, you really do talk funny, she said, grabbing a pillow and hitting him with it. That's why you love me, he replied cockily. No, this is why I love you. She rolled him over and playfully grabbed his backside. When they woke, it was almost time for dinner. They had spent nearly the entire day in bed, and she found she didn't mind at all. She kissed him and got up to dress, as he did the same. Once they were ready, they headed down to the Great Hall. She was relieved that it was just her family and the Mandaleys left. Family dinners felt more normal. Still, she wondered if they had family dinners at Casterly Rock or if it was all large feasts. Given how many Jaime said resided in the keep, she feared it was the latter. As they entered the hall, she caught the gaze of the Lady of Winterfell. She smirked back, confident in her place. With a figure like Jaime's, she doubted even Septa Catelyn would be leaving their bed early. Daisy struggled to hold back a snicker at the nickname Alysanne had come up with for Catelyn Stark. They had never spoken it out loud, but she was sure each of her sisters had thought it at one point. As she took her seat, she enjoyed the meal. Jaime had promised to import Northern ale, and the food would be familiar, but she still worried about missing home. Are you coming on the hunt tomorrow, Daisy? Lyra asked. Hunt? Daisy replied, surprised. Lord Stark's taking a few of us on a hunt in the Wolfswood, Jory said. Or are you going to be too busy with your husband? Alysanne teased, snickering. Oh, I think we can join the hunt. Besides, if we wish, I'm sure there are plenty of places we could sneak off to in the Wolfswood, Daisy said, catching Jaime's eye as he looked her way. After finishing the meal, Jaime went to speak with Jon, and Daisy decided to pray in the God's Wood. It was another thing she would miss once she went south, even though Jon had said he prayed in the God's Wood at Casterly Rock. Entering through the gate, she recalled the time she had seen her mother kneel for Jon. It had been a surprise, and while Jaime never questioned her about whether she had broken her oath, she felt the need to reassure him that she had not. As she knelt down, she began to pray, hoping that she would come to like the South and that they would like her, that she and her husband would stay safe, her family would be safe, and that she would see them all regularly. Meanwhile, Jaime and Jon were sparring, as was their morning routine. They began discussing the North and preparing for what was to come. Jon pointed out the improvements to Wintertown that would be taking place and the extra coin involved. While he concentrated more on the military aspects, they also talked about the western coast and the moat. They had gone over various ideas, and over the course of a few days, Jon had outlined budgets, and together they came up with plans to present to Lord Stark. Jaime felt a genuine sense of worthiness as he carried the pin in his pocket, truly embracing the role of the Hand of the King. He and Jon had been making plans and discussing the future, but their conversation hadn't just revolved around strategy. They had also talked about Walder and how best to train him for what lay ahead. Jaime had ordered a great sword for the man, but it was Daisy who suggested that perhaps a great sword wasn't the best use of Walder's strength. That got Jaime thinking. There were other weapons a man of his build could wield, where skill mattered less. So, he turned to Jon. What do you think, Jon? I don't know, my lord. Does the order allow non-swordsmen? It does. It's not about the weapon you wield, but the proficiency with which you wield it. I bow to your superior knowledge, Jon said with a smirk. Careful, Jon. You're sounding far too much like Jerian, Jaime laughed. They decided to test Walder with various weapons, a mace, a war hammer, a halberd, but it was the large double-sided axe that they ultimately settled on. Watching him wield it was one of the most intimidating sights Jaime had ever encountered. Even seeing Walder carry it on his back was slightly less daunting. Jaime kept the order for the greatsword since it was easy to carry on horseback, but he also commissioned a double-sided axe that would be ready before their departure. Finding Walder a destrier proved challenging, as it wasn't a typical northern horse. Instead, they would have to use a cart horse until they reached the south. Jaime watched in awe as Jon warred with the horse. It was incredible to see the animal go from nearly bolting at the thought of carrying Walder to doing so willingly. Imagining Walder in armor, wielding his axe, Jaime couldn't help but think that there might not be anyone in the Seven Kingdoms who would present a more impressive or imposing sight. This morning, he and Jon had agreed to speak with Ned about some of the ideas they had developed, along with the plans already in place. They also intended to share a few things with him that he needed to know. Jaime did not hesitate. He asked Loras to fetch the boy and bring him to the God's Wood, setting up his guards to ensure they wouldn't be disturbed. Together with Jon, he went to retrieve the chest before heading to their meeting. How do you think he'll react? Jaime wondered. I don't know, Jon. He's going to learn a lot. He is. Jon replied, placing the chest down. It felt like an eternity before Loras and Lord Stark arrived. Jaime and Jon stood silently, waiting. He recalled coming to this place with Daisy more than once since their marriage and how much he appreciated the peacefulness of it. Jon motioned for Loras to stay. They had involved the boy more and more, but Jon felt it was best to keep this meeting simple. Uncle, as you know, I was left an egg in my belongings. What you don't know is that Nan gave me another one. When? Ned asked. After we spoke, Uncle. She brought me down below the crypts to see some things. While we were down there, she gave me this. Jon said, pulling out the bronze egg. Your hand, Uncle. He watched as Ned placed his hand on the egg. Jon, is that alive? Ned asked, pulling his hand back. They both are, Jon replied, picking up the other egg. They're different, though. This one is connected to my sister. He raised the white egg. Connected? Ned asked, curiosity piqued. It's hard to explain, Uncle. I see her, Rhaenys. I speak to her, and she shows me things. That picture I drew of Uncle Brandon, Benjen, you, and Mother, I saw you all. I was there. Jon. Loras interjected, looking at him intently. Loras, you've seen what I can do. Trust me, I was there. Loras nodded, though uncertainty lingered in his eyes. What you can do? Ned asked, his brow furrowing. You know what a ward is, Uncle? A green seer? I remember Nan's stories a bit. But no, Jon, I don't. A green seer sees visions, Uncle, the past, the future. But I think I see it differently. Dragon dreams are part of it, but it's hard to explain. I saw you all at Harrenhal. My mother and father when they wed, Jon said. You mentioned you can see the future, Jon. I've seen that too. My aunt over in Essos, Ser Arthur in the west. Ser Arthur? The Sword of the Morning. He lives, Uncle. Howland saved him while you rode to get help. Jaime watched as Ned shook his head. He knew this was a lot to take in, and although he had already been aware of most of it, hearing Jon speak it aloud was still incredible. He could see that they were losing Ned's attention. While Ned might believe some of Jon's claims, he too had grown up with stories of Targaryen madness, and Jaime would be lying if he said he hadn't worried about Jon in the same way. Fortunately, he and Jon had discussed this, and Jon knew what would convince Ned. So Jaime waited, hoping it was the White Wolf he called and not something else. Watch, Uncle, Jon said, his eyes turning white. Jaime instinctively moved closer to Ned, ready to stop him if needed, and then it happened. A falcon appeared, and Jaime couldn't help but laugh at the irony. Here was a falcon dancing on strings pulled by the rightful king. The bird landed a few feet away, walked over to Ned, hopped onto his rock, and began pecking at it with its beak. Ned looked at Jaime and Loras in confusion, but they just pointed to Jon. He glanced down at the bird, tilting his head to the right, and the falcon mirrored his movements. "Jon, is that you?" Ned asked, and this time Jaime did laugh when the bird chirped, causing Ned to nearly fall from his rock. "Move your wing, Jon," Loras instructed, and the falcon obeyed. By the time the bird took off, Ned Stark was a believer, not just in warging, but in everything else as well. They then began discussing plans for the North, focusing on increasing trade and making it more secure. Jon shared some of his plans with Ser Richard and how they had already started to gain some allies. But when Jon mentioned his intention to tell more people, Ned balked. "Are you sure that's wise?" "I need to tell Jaime's family," Jon replied. "Tyrion, Jerian, and Jenna deserve to know," Jon said firmly. "What if they don't accept it, Jon? What if they don't think you're the right choice for king?" Ned asked, concern etched on his face. "Then so be it. But I'll tell them the truth, Uncle," Jon replied, his determination clear. Ned nodded in acknowledgement. "And Marjorie too," Ned added, glancing at Loras, who smiled in agreement. "What about Lady Olenna?" Ned inquired. Jon looked between Loras and Ned before answering. "I shall speak to Olenna after I tell Marjorie. Whatever she decides, I'll go along with it. My grandmother will support you, Jon." "I know it," Loras said encouragingly. "How will this affect Sansa?" Ned asked, and both he and Loras turned their attention to Jon. "It won't. No matter what happens with me, having Sansa Foster at Highgarden is something the Tyrells and Starks would be happy to do, right, Loras?" Jon said. "I think so, especially considering the trade deals." "I'm thinking like my grandmother," Loras replied, his gaze steady on Jon. "But what if they don't support you, Jon? Then we'll worry about that when the time comes." "Wait, Uncle, do you really think they'd use Sansa?" Jon's voice was tense. "No, I don't. But she's my daughter, and I need to be sure," Ned said, his protectiveness evident. "I assure you, my lord, my family is not like that," Loras said, a hint of anger in his tone. "Let's just think things through for now." "We can discuss this more another time," Jaime interjected, trying to ease the tension. Sansa had never been busier. Between her lessons, spending time with the wolves, and her new friends Willa and Winfred, she was constantly on the go. She enjoyed drawing with Jon and had even taken a couple of lessons from him on using a knife. After hearing that Lady Marjorie had taken them under her wing, Sansa couldn't help but wish to do the same. However, she wasn't ready to be taught by someone like Ser Roderick yet, so she had asked Jon to teach her what he could. She had also spent some time with Robb. One night, just before she was ready for bed, he had come to her to apologize. She had been so overwhelmed by his unexpected gesture. Sansa cried, not in that moment, but later, as she lay in bed and felt the tears fall. She had always longed for a big brother. So, when Robb teased or insulted her, or when Theon did, she had hoped that Jon would be that knight for her, someone to fight off those who would hurt her or make her cry. When Jon arrived, he turned out to be exactly that, and her heart soared. Now, with Robb as well, she had another knight, someone she could confide in, who would smile and reassure her that everything would be all right. "Sansa, can you come with me to my solar?" her father asked as she finished her breakfast. "Of course, father." She smiled at Jon and Loras before getting up from the table to see her father. It felt strange, her father was the kindest man she knew, yet she always feared being called to him. She worried she might be in trouble for something she did or said, or even for something she didn't do. Lately, though, she found that some of those fears were fading away. At first, she thought it was because her big brother was there to speak up for her, to fight for her if needed. But it was more than that. She discovered that she could stand up for herself too. Sure, she couldn't wield a sword or fight someone with her hands, though Jon had shown her where to hit a boy to hurt him badly. No, her strength came from standing up for herself, for Arya, for Bran and Robb, for Mira and Jojen, and for Jon. She had always defended her brother in her own way. She didn't allow the Septa to say bad things about her friends or family, and she had stood up to her mother when she spoke down about Mira not being a lady. When she asked Jon about it, he had laughed and told her she was a wolf, showing her fangs. That made her smile, and it inspired her to come up with her wolf's name, Fawn. Now, let them all fear both of their bites. As she walked into her father's solar, she took a seat and looked him straight in the eye, waiting for him to speak, unafraid. Sansa, I want to talk about fostering, her father began. Father? Sansa replied, feeling a mix of curiosity and apprehension. I've been thinking you're almost old enough. Your name day is just a few moons away. You're sending me away? She asked, shock evident in her voice. What? No, Sansa. I was just wondering if you would like to foster somewhere, he explained, his voice trembling slightly. Where? She asked, her tone sharp with concern. Highgarden. The moment she heard him say the word, she nearly jumped for joy. She had misunderstood, this wasn't a punishment but a reward. Her father was sending her to a place she truly wanted to go. Really, father? Are you serious? Her excitement was palpable, and she noticed the relief wash over her father's face. If you'd like it, my love, I can arrange it. You could travel back with Jon and Lord Jaime to Casterly Rock for the wedding. Lord Loras says his family will be there, so you could meet his sister and mother. Sansa felt like she was living in a dream, fostering in Highgarden, going to Casterly Rock for the wedding. She imagined nights and tournaments, grand balls, and being closer to Jon, who could visit more often. Sansa, her father asked, breaking her reverie. I'm sorry, father. Yes, yes. I'd love to go, if it's all right with you and mother. Your mother wished for you to go to Riverrun, but there are no ladies your age there, so she suggested the Vale. However, I think Highgarden is better, unless it's not what you want. No, father, I do want it. Thank you. Her smile was radiant. Then I'll make the arrangements. You'll need some guards with you, and Robb will travel part of the way with you. Robb? She asked, her eyes lighting up. Your brother will be fostering at White Harbor. That's great, father. He and Lady Winifred are already friends. But what about Arya and Bran? They'll be here on their own. No, father, we can't leave them alone. She shook her head, concern etched on her face. Your sister will foster at Bear Island when she's old enough, and Jon has offered to make Bran his squire should he be knighted. Though your mother has written to your uncle, Ser Brynden, too, her father said. But you'll be here all alone, father, just you and mother, Sansa replied sadly. It won't be for some time, Sansa. Arya and Bran are still too young. You and Robb can visit, and I may even come to see you in the south. I'm sure your mother will, her father reassured her, and she nodded. When will we be leaving, father? She asked. I think Lord Jaime plans to leave within the week, so you'll have some time to get ready. Does this make you happy, Sansa? Truly, he inquired. It does, father. It truly does, she smiled. As soon as she left the solar, she began searching for him. They had already left the hall, and she knew they would be going to see the wolves soon. Hurrying out, she walked across the courtyard and spotted Theon passing by, his guards trailing behind. He scowled at her before giving her a strange look. Sansa held her head high and ignored him. When she reached the tower, she ran and jumped into her surprised brother's arms, nearly knocking him over. I'm pleased to see you too, little sister, Jon said, shaking his head. It was you, wasn't it? You asked father, she said eagerly. Asked your father what? He replied, confused. About the fostering. I'm going to Highgarden, and Robb is going to White Harbor. I didn't know he'd decided, Jon said, his eyes widening. He has. Thank you, Jon. Thank you. Of course, little sister. I'll come visit, he said, and she smiled as she let him go. I didn't tell you the best part. I'm coming to Casterly Rock for the wedding first. You are? He exclaimed, his excitement palpable. Lorasa's family will be there, and you can introduce me to everyone. I will. I'm so happy you're coming with us, little sister, Jon said, pulling her into a hug. Sansa couldn't agree more. Jon had always known that Lady Catelyn hated him. It had been made clear to him from as early as he could remember. She had never missed an opportunity to let him know, whether through words or actions. However, over the past few days, things had shifted. The situation had grown worse. Lady Catelyn had been quiet, avoiding any direct conversation with him. In fact, she seemed to go out of her way to stay out of the same room. Not that he was complaining. Meals, though less formal with only 2 lords remaining, still carried an air of formality. He found himself enduring glares that could curdle milk, snorts that he only noticed because he was so attuned to them, and more frowns and grimaces than he could count. While he wasn't privy to the exact reasons for her behavior, he understood it clearly. She had learned about the fostering, and she blamed him for splitting up her family. It was true that the idea had been his, so he allowed her that resentment. Deep down, he knew that if he hadn't existed, she would have welcomed the thought of Sansa in Highgarden as a wonderful opportunity. She should be catching flies, Loras whispered in his ear, and Jon had to stifle a laugh as he looked at the open-mouthed expression on Lady Catelyn's face. Once a trout, he thought, and then he couldn't help but chuckle. What are you laughing about? Arya asked. I was just thinking of little wolves, Jon replied, catching the sound of her muttering, stupid, under her breath. Arya hadn't spoken to him for a couple of days, refusing to engage with him even after their father had told her she would be fostering at Bear Island when she was older. He knew this silence was rooted in their mother's influence, as she had told Arya that it was Jon who was taking her brother and sister away from her. It had been difficult to see the way she looked at him whenever he passed her near the wolves. Even Nymeria had growled at him during those 2 days. But then, just last night, a small knock on his door revealed a tear-streaked Arya, who hugged him tightly. I'm sorry. Don't hate me, please, Arya said. Hate you? Arya, I could never hate you. You're my fierce little wolf, he reassured her. Always? She asked, looking up at him. Always, he promised. Saying goodbye to her the next morning would be hard, just as it would be hard to say goodbye to all of them. Winterfell felt strange to Jon. He had never truly felt at home here, but after settling at the Rock, he realized what he had been missing: family. At the Rock, he had almost instantly felt a sense of belonging. Coming back to Winterfell, he hadn't expected to feel anything similar, yet as he prepared to leave, he found a sense of home here too, just as much as the Rock or anywhere else ever would be. After finishing his meal, he walked to the God's Wood, knelt down, and offered a prayer before making his way to his rooms. Inside, everything had been taken out and prepared for his departure. He laid his change of clothes on the chair, climbed into bed, and quickly fell asleep. The next morning, he woke early and headed to the broken tower. Peering in, he saw the mother wolf lying beside Bran's pup, the boy still too young to take him. Kneeling down, Jon looked into her eyes and felt a connection. Home. Protect. Take. Protect. My friend. He nodded to the wolf, then stood up to leave. The 2 male wolves, one black and one gray, followed, glancing back at their mother and brother before trotting after him. As he emerged from the tower, Ghost appeared, kneeling down to lick the gray wolf and then rubbing against their mother's chest. Soon, the 2 smaller wolves flanked Jon, their big brother watching over them for now. They quickly broke their fast and lined up in the courtyard to say their goodbyes. Meege and her daughters had already said theirs, as had Lord Wyman and Ser Wylis. Jon stood silently as Sansa bid farewell first to their mother and father, followed by Robb. When it was his turn, he spoke up. "Goodbye, Lord Stark. I promise to speak to you soon and to make sure Sansa is well." "I know you will, Jon," Lord Stark replied. "Look after the wolf, Lord Stark. She wants to make a home here. She'll protect you if you allow her," he added, earning a smile from his uncle. "Lady Stark," he said politely, and she nodded in response. "Goodbye for now." "Now, little wolf, I'll write as often as I can," he said to Arya. "Will you come visit me again?" "I promised, didn't I?" she replied, nodding. He hugged her tightly. "I'm sorry I didn't get to spend much time with you, brother. But when you're older, you can be my squire if you want." "Promise?" "I promise. Look after your wolf, Bran." "I will, Jon." He helped Sansa into the carriage that Willa and Winifred would be using. He saw his brother say goodbye to Theon, who seemed to be looking at him more than at Robb. Jon climbed onto Winter, preparing to ride out. He took one last look around Winterfell, feeling the weight of the moment. He ended up being the last to ride out, with Winter walking slowly, Ghost and his brothers trotting alongside. As he approached the gate, he saw Jors, Allers, and Walder waiting there. He gave Walder a smile, wondering when he would return, and whether it would be as Jon Snow, the bastard of Winterfell, or as Jaehaerys Targaryen, king of the Seven Kingdoms.